recycling. How is recycling being done? It's not always the case. You recall my example about newspaper? Take note, class, all solid waste or hazardous waste may be recyclable, possibly recyclable, but not all are actually recyclable. Did you get it? So, consider the newspaper. It is possible to recycle, but it is not feasible to recycle because of some additional treatment to be done with the paper. Okay, so that's one consideration. Another consideration is the market. Are you recycling the material for what? So if there is no possible market, you may just be adding up to possible waste. So that's one consideration. Now this would be the industrial waste management paradigm. You recall if in wastewater we have paradigm, in solid waste we also have paradigm. So one would be sorting and recycling. If you cannot have this sort or after sorting and recycling, you can either give it to composting or you can also use it for energy source. And finally, if you can no longer utilize it at any means, you can do landfilling. Okay, one substance or chemicals.
So what that involves is offloading it from our trucks, filtering it to take out all the suspended solids, separating out any free water that might have come back through condensation in the storage tanks.
The used oil is then pumped out again into tankers, ready for its next life.
What are the benefits from recycling? Number one, resource conservation. So you can recycle iron, aluminum cans, and waste paper. How do you conserve recycling, particularly for glass manufacturing? In glass manufacturing, they utilize cullets. Cullets are actually the small bits of glasses that are considered as waste. So why would it be a source conservation, particularly on energy? Why? Do you know how to produce a glass? Have you learned it from CPI? Okay, how do you produce a glass? You put sodium bicarbonate, you put limestone, and then you put it in a big furnace and then set it at a very, very, very high temperature. If you will utilize only half or at least 3/4 of the raw materials and then you just add these cullets into the furnace, it has been found out to decrease the energy consumption. So that's one of the benefits of recycling. Next would be pollution prevention. So you produce less pollutants. So that's self-explanatory. For example, if you recycle iron, this will minimize maintenance. And that will give you domino effects on preserving the environment. Okay. Now, another benefit of recycling would be, as mentioned, the energy conservation. You can not only on manufacture of glass, but also recycling paper, metals, rubbers. All of these processes would reduce much energy in production. Now, another thing, when you recycle glass, there's one common thing being utilized in industry which we call RDF. What is RDF? Refuse-derived fuel. What is this? Instead of using 100% coal or 100% industrial waste, we get some of the solid waste. For example, rubber tires, we cut it into very, very small pieces and then we add it as a fuel. Now, the problem here, I have been involved in one of the projects of DOST for a cement company, we tried to do this, but there's only a certain percentage of RDF that you should add. Why? For two considerations. Number one, you might be causing more pollution. Okay? Number two, you might be utilizing or you might be affecting the heating value of the fuel. So again, there should be a study on this. I was involved with respect to the emission, and we have found out that the percentage RDF or refuse derived fuel should only be 5%. If it exceeds beyond 5%, the SOx, the CO emission, and the other criteria pollutants the concentration would increase already. And therefore, this project of DOST had not been fully implemented. Solid waste handling and processing would involve different activities. So this would be particularly handling of solid waste and transferring it from one area to another. Now, in the collection system, in order for the ease and frequency of pick-up, there are some schedules. And also, I think it was promoted by one of the speakers, if you remember the lady. She was telling us that we need to be kind to our garbage collectors, because if you do not do segregation at home, being the source of the solid waste, they themselves would be burdened with segregation. And it would be difficult for the sanitary landfill to do the segregation. So, in some cases, or in some villages, or in some subdivisions, we have scheduled about this. So we have the collection of dry solid waste separately with the wet solid waste. So if you happen, in our village, if you happen to dispose or you put the garbage can for wet while the schedule is for dry, it will be penalized. So that's one of the way on how to ease and ease the frequency of, or make the pick-up easier and less frequent. Then they are using collection equipment such as packer trucks. Now, if you have seen trucks like this, they have what you call compactor. So the purpose of that is to lower the volume of your solid waste. Then there is a transfer station. What's the purpose of transfer station? Because normally if it's a village or it's a small community, you cannot have the big trucks go inside. So they have smaller trucks to go around the village, and then when they go out of the village, they transfer it to bigger trucks. If you also recall during our visit yesterday, it was mentioned that the sanitary landfill is located in Subic, Clark, but some of the waste would be coming from Muntinlupa. So that's interesting. So the big trucks now would be the ones which will transfer the solid waste from Muntinlupa to Subic or Clark, for that matter. Then, in the collection system class, it's very important that you select the route. Why? Number one, you have to minimize the congestion of traffic due to these big trucks. So, if you are a sanitary landfill operator, you have to consider that, yung route of the vehicles. Number two, most of the landfills that were already operating few years back have the problem of accidents. If you do not select your route properly, it had been found out that some accidents occur when the trucks would be passing through community or residential areas. Aside from the fact that if the trucks are not well maintained and well operated, number one, it will be causing pollution, air pollution, and then number two, some of the solid waste are found to be being littered in the streets. And of course, yung accidents would also be mitigated if you have good training for drivers. Okay, so in the industry, this slide class shows you the different collection services being done, the different bin that are being utilized. And then please take note that when you're in the industry, you have to make sure of proper labeling. So as to determine whether one is recyclable, reusable, or for disposal. I think we have one project being done now in our school. So you see those collection of plastic bottles. Okay. This class is an immobile compactor. The compactor that I told you that are built in the mobile trucks are different with this one. These are also used to lessen the volume. Now, after compacting, they pile the waste properly. Take a look at this. So these are actually piled solid waste. These are actually those that you should have seen in the MRF that we saw yesterday. But as mentioned by the speaker, the operation is it's not ongoing when we visit it. One thing that interests me is the weighbridge. They have the weighbridge. That's their means of monitoring the amount of waste that are being treated. However, it was discussed with the speaker that they have to charge the source or the waste generator per net, right? So the truck will get inside and be weighed, and then after it has dumped all the solid waste, it will be weighed back again. Then the difference would be the net weightage that would be charged to the customer. So, for the separation and processing of municipal solid waste, aside from compactors, they are using grinders. So these are on-site grinders. Normally, at home, they have the garbage grinders and carburetors. I've seen one in the internet wherein they have the sink, and then at the bottom, they have the solid waste grinder. So you don't need to segregate. Unlike in the Philippines, or in our case, we segregate the solid waste before we wash our dishes. So in other countries or in other villages, they have already the home garbage grinders and carburetors. Then of course, you have the compactors, as mentioned a while ago, which reduce the volume of the solid waste by 70%. And then, this is also a normal practice in some communities. They do composting. Composters, these are a collection of organic material in a pile and occasionally adding water and stirring to promote microbial decomposition. Although, when you study composting further, it's not simply because the composting that we know is what? You just dug a pit at your backyard and then put all the waste. That's not what it is. As defined, you have to occasionally add water and you have to stir because you have to maintain certain moisture content as well as certain temperature in your compost in order not to produce obnoxious odor.